So let me welcome everybody back regarding our second session, which is going to be on the future of e-commerce. And let me just briefly introduce the topic, a little bit of background, and then introduce our special moderator here. So COVID-19 has obviously changed a lot of the ways that consumers shop for products. They become much more accustomed to online ordering, on-demand delivery. And this was reiterated by Jennifer in her presentation. According to McKinsey, on the back of its base of nearly 1 billion internet users, China's e-commerce sales grew to $1.7 trillion in 2020, a number that is equivalent to 30% of all retail sales in China. While economic, societal, and demographic trends propelled by the pandemic account for the recent surge, nowhere is e-commerce more imaginative or widely adopted than in China. From mobile commerce, social media, short-form videos, live streaming, digital wallets to e-commerce in the region, all of it is inventive, digital-first, social, and gamified. To address the major trends propelling Chinese e-commerce in the future and explain how the explosion of social commerce is driving shopping interest and purchases, I'd like to introduce you to the moderator of our second session, Chris Tang. Chris is the Distinguished Professor at UCLA. He's the Edward W. Carter Chair in Business Administration and serves as the Faculty Director for UCLA Anderson Center for Global Management, the host and organizer of the annual WU Conference. He is a foremost scholar on global supply chain management, and exposure to real-life industry projects have motivated his academic research, where he's developed teaching cases on a variety of topics such as microfinancing for the poor, mobile platforms for developing economies, and new business models in the age of the internet. World-renowned in the field of global supply chain management, he's been a consultant to numerous companies, including Amazon, HP, IBM, and Accenture. He's published 6 books and is a frequent contributor to and quoted in the Wall Street Journal, Barron's, Financial Times, Fortune, and China Daily. In this session, our panelists, who Chris will introduce, will discuss the major trends propelling Chinese e-commerce in the future and explain how the explosion of social commerce is driving shopping interest and purchases. They'll share their views on how the desire for convenience and efficiency will rapidly narrow the gap between on-demand and traditional e-commerce, and explain how the seamless introduction between retail and social landscape will improve supply chain agility. For the second session, we'll have time for audience questions just like the first. Please pose your questions in Slido, which is embedded in the bottom of your screen. You can type in your questions there. You can also upvote, and we'll endeavor to pose the most popular questions. A big welcome and thank you to Professor Chris Tang.
Terry, thank you very much for the kind introduction. Good evening, USA, and good morning, China. So in this session, we will discuss with our panelists about the future of e-commerce and retail and the role of social commerce. Before I introduce our distinguished guests, let me say a few words about the background and the context of this session. Unlike American consumers who are using credit cards or writing checks, Chinese consumers have leapfrogged traditional payment systems. They are really tech savvy and they shop online. They're using the mobile phones to shop in websites such as Alipay, WeChat Pay, and this mobile payment systems has really propelled the exponential growth of the e-commerce giants such as Alibaba, JD.com, Pinduoduo in China. Around the world, the trends of e-commerce took an unexpected surge during the COVID pandemic. China is no exception. In 2021, e-commerce generated $2.7 trillion in sales, accounting for over 50% of retail sales in China. The adoption rate in China is far exceeds the United States. Now, even before COVID pandemic, 80% of all the e-commerce sales in China are made through mobile phones. And over 1 billion people in China, they spend 5 to 6 hours every day on social media. Now, but things are changing. China's Cyberspace Administration hinted last week that they're planning to regulate the social media in China. They have not yet announced new rules, but they did limit the amount of time for children to play online games down to 3 hours per week in 2021. Regardless, these new Chinese shopping habits creating a great opportunity for firms to develop new advertising and marketing strategies using data analytics, such as machine learning and AI. This trend motivates us to examine the following questions. First, what and how firms can leverage this customers' trend to develop innovative e-commerce or social commerce strategies in China and beyond. Second, how would new regulations affect e-commerce and social commerce in the future? To answer these questions, it is my privilege to introduce our distinguished guest this evening. Our first guest is Pamela Mar. Pamela has a super impressive career spanning academia, NGOs, and the private sector. He is currently the Executive Vice President of the Fung Group. At the Fung Group, Pamela focused on technology and supply chain innovation with an emphasis on sustainability. Prior to working at the Li Fung Group, she led the World Economic Forum in the Greater China region. Next, our second guest is Phil Kim. Phil is the chairman and the board of the managing director of Asia Pacific at the Jerde Partnership Incorporated. He has led many projects in Asia, and currently he is the chair of the Hong Kong Council of Urban Land Institute. He also serves as an expert advisor to cities and governments in emerging countries around the Asia Pacific. Last but not least, I'm delighted to introduce our proud UCLA Anderson alumna, Grace Huang. Grace sets the vision to build a world-class EdTech, MarTech platforms to facilitate digital transformation of business in China. Grace currently is the CEO and the founder of DeepZero, a leading firm in the MarTech industry that's driven by the AI algorithms. DeepZero has a world-leading L&D team responsible for data mining and machine learning algorithms. Grace is also recognized as one of the top 100 elite entrepreneurs by the UK business publication Campaign. Welcome. Grace, let me begin with you. When I introduced you, I noticed that you want to build a world-class EdTech and MarTech platforms in China. I wonder if these terms are related to fintech. So for starters, please explain what is the difference between EdTech, MarTech, and the normal advertising and marketing, please.
All right. Thanks, Chris, and good evening to our US audience, and morning to Chinese audience. So very, very brief explanation on what is EdTech and MarTech. Basically, the idea is using data as a key power for decisions in marketing. So when we say EdTech, basically we're using algorithm and data to make advertising more effective. When we say MarTech, basically we're looking at a much broader sense of marketing, including not only advertising, but also like CRM, like product recommendation, like even like product innovation, et cetera, like creative. So we make everything out of data, so we can make like creatives, for example, much more relevant to consumers. We in e-commerce platform, we make product recommendation more relevant to our consumers. So that's pretty much the whole range of MarTech. Yeah.
Well, thank you. So in that case, you need a lot of data, and China is a perfect country to provide consumer data. Now, so that means that using data, you can do data-driven advertising and marketing strategies. Now, how would that affect in terms of the future of e-commerce or social commerce via social media and gamification using games?
Sure. I think e-commerce is the best foundation for data, right? Because if you look at the e-commerce, one of the beauty of the business model is like because it's end-to-end from a consumer journey. Okay, unlike traditional brand marketing or traditional manufacturing and then supply chain model. So data is everywhere. So for e-commerce, like the data, the basic usage is along the whole consumer journey, from very beginning, like to detect a consumer landing to an e-commerce platform, what this person might be liking and what this person might be searching for. It's a great indicator of the person's like preference. Okay, and then like Amazon has done, famous for its recommendation engine. So instead of like human search for specific product, the data actually can provide you much better choices of product recommendation. And when you in advertising for e-commerce platform, for example, when you abandon a shopping cart, the e-commerce platform will know, right? So they will do what we call the retargeting advertising. Like that's what Google in the rest of the world and Amazon, like in China, we do a lot for other e-commerce platform to really trace back or retarget back the people who abandon a shopping cart, and then using a coupon or using other product to entice the consumers back to the e-commerce platform, therefore to increase the GMV, et cetera. I think for the social, when it comes to the social e-commerce, actually, in our mind, it actually complement with more data, meaning the social data. When people are looking at the video stream and chatting with the friends, for example, we work with some of the social platform to understand what product recommendation, what social network they are in. Therefore, we can use more social comments. We're using more like social, what we call the KL, like key opinion leader, to influence consumers' choice on the product specifically. So I think with more formats of e-commerce, that means more data. The data, of course, is like privacy protected, but the data is aggregated. We can really use that in the modeling and in the algorithm to increase the predictiveness of the consumer's preference and the behaviors.
Wow, this is fascinating. That means instead of waiting for the consumer to search for products, using data analytics, you can actually push the product to the consumer. Fascinating. Now, we'll come back to you later on. Now, let me turn to Phil Kim. Phil, you have developed many successful projects in Asia that combined design, retail, urbanization, and vertical cities. In the United States, Amazon has really combined online, offline, and the presence with physical stores and warehouses. Alibaba did the same. They also have the online presence and also offline stores such as Hema. So in that case, the division between online and offline is becoming pretty much mixed, blurry. Now, in your opinion, if that's the case, how is it going to affect in terms of the e-commerce retail in the urban setting?
Yes, thank you, Professor Tang. I'm probably the black sheep on this panel anyways, because it's part of kind of a 10-year debate on whether physical retail will be destroyed by the growth of e-commerce and so much data and technology that's actually available. So I'll kind of filter it through that lens. I think the immersion of the two, online, offline, is what's really exciting about the broader context of urbanization, particularly countries like China, which is so tech savvy. And even under COVID kind of conditions where people were relatively isolated, where the retail numbers went up so significantly, essentially like 30% of retail sales in China via e-commerce, 2-3 years back to over 50% during the years of COVID. But the cases where COVID has somewhat subsided over these past 2 years, the results are fairly clear that the demand for physical retail remains. I mean, we are human beings. We have a need to connect, and as much convenience and improving experiences that we can get through digital, online, social media, and our phones, we still actually require the two together. So you mentioned Homa, for instance, as an example. And I think for those operators who've had Homa for the last 7-8 years, the phenomena has been really interesting to track. So if for those of you who don't know, that's essentially Alibaba's push into physical retail. And I think what they were expecting at the time was it would essentially be showcasing retail to really heighten experience, put out certain kind of key products where people could touch. But the expectation was that the majority of the purchases and trading would be done online. So even if you're there. So the early expectations was 90% online sales, 10% in-store sales for their locations. Surprisingly, what they've actually found that it's much closer to 50-50. And the tracking and the trending is that physical store purchases will actually outpace the e-commerce version of it. Now, of course, what they're doing is something significant and very focused on perishables, but also one which can have very heightened experiences, such as food, the seafood, for instance, where you can have it cooked on site. You can also do your research, of course, because it's completely related. But the phenomena then is also that you're actually ordering at the store as you're eating for your mother, your friends, your brother, and then having it delivered to their homes. And so it's all completely interlinked. And I think the exciting aspect of this is that it's not the death of retail, but the death of bad retail. And that in the future, the way operators have to set up their projects and run it is to allow for a certain amount of stability to the understanding of physical retail as we know. But the other half of it is going to be much more exciting, where it's rents are shorter, the duration, we call it pop-up, of course, but that's a very old term. But the idea of really focusing on authentic products and experiences that the consumers have, and that we'll be constantly choreographing that portion of it so that a sense of place is vital, real, and constantly adapting.
Well, thank you. So it's good to hear that the online is not going to kill off the physical space in the future. Now, actually, you raise a very good point in terms of relationship, human touch, and whatnot. Now, we also observed that in China, in the more remote cities in China, some of the small shops, they don't have the fancy digitization of the stores. That's why Alibaba formed a partnership program with some of the small shops. The program is called 零售通. It's actually, they have actually partnered using Tmall, partner with the small shops. They created 1.5 million these kind of small shops with this kind of partnership. So that will facilitate maybe online, offline, that kind of experience. Now, do you see this trend, this form of partnership will really continue to expand in China or in Asia as well?
It will continue to expand. I think for the secondary, tertiary cities and smaller communities, not just in China, but around the world, localization is incredibly important. Of course, the strength of e-commerce is that you can essentially get goods from anywhere. And so that actually means that the customization that's kind of required and how to create authentic experiences, which drives kind of connection to experience and memories and your sense of loyalty about your experiences is kind of fundamental. It also, in terms of economic and real sustainability, developing an ecosystem around vendors, retailers, producers, and operators within a specific geographic territory that's much more sustainable. I think that's a really important one to not just generate income for the local cities, but actually really to have a sense of craft, to create a sense of a village that is actually meaningful for your neighborhood. And so one of the issues about retail overall is people kind of tend to underestimate the sense of loyalty and how important that actually is fundamentally. So as much as you can go to use e-commerce, and that will absolutely be there and that will continue to improve, for those kind of particular places, a relatively small collection of mom and pop shops done correctly, orchestrated correctly, will have quite deep meaning. So you can still order, through Alibaba or Tmall, anything, goods from all over the world, but you're going to be focusing on a different set of experiences for what happens in front of you with your neighbors, with your families.
Well, that is very interesting. That means in the future, after all, retailing is really pivot into more experiential kind of experience that has some meaning, not just buying just a product, right?
Yeah,
so
and I think I'm sorry, just kind of going back to the point Grace made. That's where I'm not a complete Luddite when it comes to technology. I love the idea that as long as we as consumers are willing to participate, that sense of customization that's required will actually drive to very adaptive kind of practices. So, goods and experiences constantly turning and evolving that actually fit our needs best, rather than just having to accept what others are providing at a larger kind of platform. So that constant customization, I think, will be a really interesting phenomenon.
Well, that is very fascinating in terms of customization. So that's each customer have a personalized experience. But in order to provide that, you need to build a cluster or ecosystem that will have more customized services in terms of from the product assortments to the distributors, to the warehousing, to the stores and whatnot. Now, let me come back to you later on. Let me now to speak with Pamela. Pamela, I know that you implement many innovative projects at the Fung Group. Your passion about sustainability and supply chain innovations are really well known in Asia. So now many experts predict the e-commerce trend is going to change even in the post-pandemic era. So especially Phil was talking about maybe in the future there will be more customized kind of services or personalized, localized, if you will. So given this trend, how do you think it's going to change the supply chain network design in the future to provide this kind of more localized experience for the shoppers?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I mean, the trend towards more customization and greater targeting of products has been underway for several years, driven by, what's going on in the West already. I think from a supply chain perspective, it has driven a greater digitization of the supply chain, a shift to smaller quantities, a shift to more targeted production using data from the point of sale. And so what that means for the supply chain is, from the supplier's perspective, is that you have to upgrade your operations. You have to automate, you have to digitize, and this all requires investment. So the role of access to financing and the role of technology know-how in the supply chain has risen in importance. And what this means is that those suppliers which actually have access to knowledge and to finance, they are at an advantage. And so that means the more well-off suppliers, the bigger suppliers are actually in a position of advantage. And those which don't have the capital to keep up, that they're kind of being left behind or consolidated. And I mean, just the pandemic has really accelerated the digitization of different processes within the supply chain. And I would say that also the shift towards, especially in the US, towards demanding more traceability. Where's the product from? How has it been made? How much carbon is embedded in it? All of that has really also built up the need for technologization of the supply chain. And so for a supplier, it's like if you're, it's sink or swim. You have to be able to deliver the data and it has to be verified, it has to be traceable, or otherwise, you won't be able to serve a certain kind of customer. And I think for, the Chinese consumer isn't well known for their push on sustainability. Right now, they are not asking about, is the product sustainable? It's just a buy culture. But eventually, Asia's going to catch up. And as the Chinese government's attention on climate and environment and security increases, the consumer is going to become more aware. And at that point, supply chain has to deliver. I would say one more thing, which is that, we don't think so much about, in the e-commerce space, the focus is on how many products did you sell today, right? Is the volume going up or down? Of course, the volume should always go up. And I think this, from a sustainability perspective, is actually very dangerous because, the saying goes, if every Asian consumes like every American and European, the planet's going to be pushed off the edge. So we already see this happening. The IPCC report is that, we're just emitting too much. And by the way, streaming uses several times more energy and emits several times more carbon emissions than simply reading a text. So, from a sustainability perspective, the push towards everything should be streamed, everything should be, experiential on the web. That's a bit dangerous because we're not actually going for volume. We need to be using the data from commerce in order to drive better and smarter production. So unless we're doing that, having more data doesn't really help. We need to stop manufacturers from just manufacturing, stop brands from just manufacturing in volume and hoping to push it out using the additional channel. The channel needs to serve us. And that means the data from the channel should drive better product design, better marketing, better targeting, and ultimately less production. So overproduction is a problem that, the US has kind of specialized in, because it was the land of mass production. But now we have data. So let's hope China and Asia don't repeat the same mistake, because that is the biggest sustainability issue that's facing the retail sector. Sorry, I've gone on for too long.
No, it's fantastic, Pamela. This is really a fantastic comment on that. I think that really touch upon about the future of supply chain or the e-commerce. Instead of keep on selling things, we also need to think about how to reduce waste, reduce unnecessary production, unnecessary product. Now, so in order to do that, as you point out, the seller and the suppliers need to upgrade in terms of using technology, using data, maybe using Grace algorithm and whatnot. Now, but then most of the companies, they cannot afford it because it is, they need to keep the train running. Now, yes, they need financing. For the big firms, no problem. Like Alibaba, no problem. But for smaller firms, they have difficulty access the funding so that they can upgrade to compete. Now, in the context of equitable access to financing, I know that you're doing some work, great work in supply chain finance. Can you tell us a little bit how with supply chain finance can really help smaller companies to do good? Because right now, they cannot afford to do that. They just keep on sell. But then they say, well, just don't sell. It says sell the right amount, make the right amount of money, but then you have to do it in a smart way, customize, small lots, small batches. Then how do you help them to do that?
So I would say that it's not up to the SMEs to fix finance. That is the responsibility of brands, buyers, and financial institutions. The SME has been chronically underserved across the emerging markets for decades. It's well known, trade finance gap. And, the finance industry goes on and on about financial inclusion, but essentially it is not a very democratic kind of industry. It's like those who have can get access. Those who have can get more. Those who don't have can't get anything. So I think the solution to the lack of financing availability for SMEs who don't have collateral, who don't have a big balance sheet, which can support lending, and whose loan amount is too small for most financial institutions to be profitable, given that they have to satisfy, know your customer, anti-money laundering, all these kind of prudential risk mitigation measures. The SMEs need a finance system which is more digital to take care of the cost implication for financing, and which is more joined up. And the buyers can help. The buyers can actually use their credit in order to provide supplier financing. And that's an absolutely essential part of the process. And I would say that the most forward-looking buyers are using supply chain financing to attract the best suppliers. Okay, so it means that those buyers who come to the table with, technology, with know-how, and with financing can basically be the magnet for the best suppliers, particularly in the emerging markets. China is probably the exception because the Chinese government is very forward-looking when it comes to supporting its suppliers with all kinds of training, access to financing, and so on. So Chinese suppliers have an advantage because their government is clued in. Now, the suppliers in other countries where the government has too much else going on and can't, deliver an updated finance system so fast, like Bangladesh, Pakistan, Cambodia, the whole rest of the emerging markets, the buyer needs to step in and use their bank financing and a lot of multilateral financing, like from the Asian Development Bank and the IFC. All of these have supply chain financing for SMEs because it's a well-known problem, but the buyer needs to step up. And I think this is something for you as a consumer. We have a lot of, everyone here is a consumer. Ask the question, what are your brands, your favorite brands doing for their suppliers? How are they helping their suppliers to step up? Every brand goes on and on about how great their supply chain is and how sustainable it is. Are they doing that by pushing down on their suppliers and forcing them to sink or swim? Or are they actually supporting their suppliers to upgrade?
Wow, this is really a wonderful speech. I think that in terms of sustainability, even have the business to be sustainable, I think that the means the supply chain or even the e-commerce need to look into financing. But in the particular case, I understand that the Fung group knows the supply very well. They can afford to have an in-depth knowledge about the supply to provide financing. But for those small SMEs, they may need to rely on fintech in terms of using small data transactions. That comes back to our next topic. So now let us shift our focus to discuss about e-commerce ecosystem in the future. Now we know that e-commerce is going to continue to grow in the post-pandemic era. But then at the front end, we know that it's advertising and marketing. At the back end, it's more the supply chain, as Pamela talked about. And three of you are the experts on these elements. Now, Grace, let me start with you. Let us talk about the demand side of e-commerce. Now, from your vantage points, how should a brand like Louis Vuitton leverage mobile commerce or social media to promote the products to increase sales using various e-commerce platforms? Share with us, please.
Correct. Yeah, I think the fact that in China, every consumer is probably use e-commerce platform. And this trend make every brand start to think their e-commerce strategy, especially with the epidemic. I think it's first, different categories have different strategies. I think luxury is probably the last frontier, I would say, in the e-commerce. If you look at across different categories, it always started with more standard, book, food, fast food, et cetera, But luxury started to embrace e-commerce in the past 2 or 3 years. So I think there are a couple of things we need to notice when we come to e-commerce. Number one is consumers are very scattered. There are a lot of different platforms, including large ones like Alibaba, Jingdong, etc. But also there are smaller ones, more emerging ones, not I should not say small, but more emerging, like Douyin, Toutiao, e-commerce grows very, very fast in the past 2 years. But I think for the luxury brands, they really focus on their brand image. So most of them started on the Tmall, okay, instead of on other platform. So it's really varies. I would say if I started to give suggestion to a brand, we started to look at the category. Number two is I think China is not, a 300 million people country, right? It's like huge market, and different markets. We look at the first tier, second tier, third tier, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not really like one strategy. We work with a lot of like, for example, like cosmetic brands for their e-commerce strategy. We found like consumers in different tier of cities have totally different product preference, have different buying behaviors on e-commerce platform. So they have to adopt different completely assortment strategy, completely like promotional strategy, etc., for different tier of cities. Number three is like I think when we come to recommend to clients on the e-commerce strategies, we always think it is very crucial to have their own territory, meaning that they don't really rely 100% on third party or like large e-commerce platform, because the data is completely like within the ecosystem. They cannot really do too much about it. Okay, so over time they found like all the data, all the consumer behaviors, all the important assets might not be controlled by them over time. Okay, so for a lot of like especially like luxury brands or more, I would say brand driven type of categories, we always recommend clients to do their own like WeChat e-commerce, or they do their own even their own proprietary e-commerce shop. So those are very, very important things for them to have a deeper understanding of their consumer insights, to have the better, they can do much better A/B testing on their own territory compared to like Jingdong or Ali. So those are really the important things when a brand comes to e-commerce in China. But on top of that, of course, they need to do more targeting, they need to do more personalization, etc. As I mentioned before, those are they used to be more advanced technology, but right now I think they are more like baselines. We work with a lot of luxury brands to do personal recommendation on their own WeChat stores, okay, for example. So those are very, very important, I would say.
Well, thank you. So now you talk about in terms of luxury brands, they need to really get to the very personalized or customized advertising strategy. Now, then in the case, the social media like WeChat could be very helpful in terms of how different consumers' behavior and whatnot now. But then we also know that in terms of social commerce, now they're using a lot of live streaming, videos, and some other things they post on WeChat, Douyin, and Kuaishou. And also this, then instead of text, now Pamela pointed out early on, that takes much more energy. Okay, putting the energy issues aside, how do you capture the value of all these videos? Because I understand that in order to do AI or data analytics, you need to transform all these visual images, text, chatting into codified data. How do you go about doing that? And how can someone improve upon it?
Well, I think in terms of technology side, the decodifying the video content is not an easy job. So right now we are doing tagging. So basically we're tagging different format of video content. So in order to like really to understand what is driving the performance of different video content. So that's pretty much the current technology, I would say. The other format, of course, is really to we're still using like what we call the look-alike model. So people who are like, I think that's very popular with Douyin, with a lot of social commerce as well. So people are like click on that with the use different matrix, for example, like the length of the viewing, like the click like the et cetera. We use those data to verify whether this specific individual likes this video or not. And then we use the consumer's behavior to do a clustering. So basically we think that, if this group of people like this kind of video with certain tags, that means we can pop up more similar video content to drive to the e-commerce. So that's really more realistic technology, not too advanced, but it works. Yeah.
Wow, this is fascinating because I did a little bit work on clustering. You aggregate some of the videos and you form clusters and then try to predict. Very clever. I really found it fascinating. Now, but then we know that the Cyberspace Administration of China, they are planning, they just mentioned last week that they're going to regulate social media. How would this form of regulations affect data privacy in the future for the entire market?
Well, I think there are a lot of regulation related to like privacy, data, like cybersecurity, et cetera, and also the content. It has been pretty messy, I would say, in the past few years because of different formats are popping up and, like a lot of UGC contents. And of course, the data is kind of sometimes wrongly used. So we are like very much embracing the law. I think everybody in the space, including the e-commerce platform, content provider, data consuming or database technology companies are paying a lot of attention to data privacy, to the content security and formality. The open screen, like right now in China, you cannot really like click on that. You have to have the certain areas of click. You cannot really, allow consumers to click so that they can wrongly be led to another, destination platform, et cetera. So there are a lot of laws and regulations. I think it's really in helping, to clean up the environment for consumers. And most of the e-commerce, or I would say everybody, is paying close attention to the latest law on the privacy and on the social content, et cetera. So I think over time it's really work in the best benefit of consumers, and as result is really benefiting the whole industry. So we are, I understand our clients, for example, are paying close attention to the consensus. For example, our product, we have a data management platform. We just upgrade our consensus management module to make sure all the consensus agreement are captured so that communication or data usage is completely in compliance with the consumers' given consensus, for example. Yeah. So it's very good to the industry. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, while we know that China is a very dynamic country, anything could be changed in due course. So time will tell. Now, let me turn to Phil. Now we know that Grace talked about the front end. The front end in terms of getting customer demand, try to do the predictive analysis and also pushing product out. But then in the back end, someone needs to get the product to the consumers. Now, that is related to logistics. As you see, that is like Amazon, to invest heavily in logistics. Alibaba is the same thing. They acquired China. And also Jingdong, also they developed their own completely automated warehouse in Shanghai, which they did not allow me to see because I want to see the autonomous warehouse. They said, it's a company secret. Anyway, so knowing that all the e-commerce companies, they feel that logistics is the last frontier to win the competition. Now, then how would that affect the urban area? Because right now, a lot of people, they shop online, as you see in China, also in the US, and also they work from home. So basically that's everyone, they just stay at home waiting for the food to deliver to them at home and all this. So does it mean that we don't need that much retail space? Instead, we need more warehouse space, more ghost kitchen space to cook the meals. So in that case, we change the dynamics with this shift. So how do you see this trend in Asia and other countries? Phil, up to you.
Yeah, Professor Tang, you're going to put me out of business with these kind of questions. I take the position, and this is, although it's anecdotal, from Australia to Southeast Asia to China, on the issue of fulfillment, because of all this technology that's available and analytics and logistics being one of during COVID, the hottest real estate sector market product, actually. They are just absolutely everywhere. And so that's really pointing to a couple of things, and primarily speed, how quickly we can get to the consumers what they want in a shorter period of time. So on that part of convenience and fulfillment, I think that's relatively clear. The counter reaction on the retail side, and alluding to what I spoke about earlier, is that these large projects in rapidly urbanized countries like mainland China, we're talking about neighborhood scale projects that actually just pop up. And so even in the service of public space and public realm, these big retail centers actually solve multiple purpose. And so the gratification for consumers is only one aspect of it. It's conveniences and services, learning centers, a place to take your kids and family. And so they're really truly town centers. So with that, the way that fulfillment used to be handled because of the value of the property is that there'll be a little bit of logistics at the back of a property. That's not what's happening today. Today, what is happening is that this idea of fulfillment is really front and center because consumers have so many options to purchase or experience goods, whether it's digital or in person. So if you think about a piazza or a town center, which is really at the center of most properties, that's where you have your luxury goods and events typically. And now what we're doing is to program service centers, almost like it's on Main Street, and it's the main square where everything happens. So security, fulfillment center, not just like Amazon lockers, which is what you have in the US, but real distribution centers so that the flow of goods and services is from those logistics centers to these primary centers and then also to the home. So customers have their choice to experience it in any kind of channel that they want, and it can also be fulfilled in any kind of channel. So there's an awful lot of people, surprisingly, who will come to these centers pre-COVID and probably post-COVID, where it doesn't sound right, but you're experiencing a retail experience, and then you order on your phone, you've done your research, and then you think you're just going to send it home. But some people require instant gratification, and for that, these large centers now are actually having logistics also on retail properties.
Well, thank you. So that means that is now consumers getting very impatient. Either they order online, they want it fast, you go to the store, they want it fast. But that creates another problem because in that case, that means that they need to have a location facilities close to where you're located. Could be located in your office, located in your home. Now, that creates a problem. We have seen it in the United States. Now we have seen many trucks, Amazon trucks, UPS trucks, FedEx trucks. My street near my home is always traffic jam because all these trucks delivering things, right? If the e-commerce continue to grow, the city traffic will get worse and the carbon emissions that Pamela worried a lot. Would that occur in China? Because Chinese consumers are actually beginning to aware of the impact on their health in terms of carbon emissions. They worry about air and water quality in China. Do you see that this is going to happen in China, Pamela? And also that what the government and company is going to do about it?
Yeah, so I guess the $100,000 question is, what is the future of e-logistics? And it's the biggest challenge being the last mile. How do we, we can build warehouses and they can be automated. And by the way, you can come and visit LF Logistics' automated warehouses when you next come to Asia. I think the question is, how do we use GPS and computer software to create the most efficient delivery of good? And if you see now, actually Amazon is moving away, or it's beginning to offer, pick up your location pick up your good from a locker. And I think these kind of options will actually be very important because they consolidate. They allow a higher efficiency for the deliverer, but nobody's really solved this equation. The experiment of using drones to deliver kind of didn't go anywhere. I would tend to think that from a logistics perspective, the warehouses of tomorrow fully automated, the distribution network fully driven by AI. And we humans have to trust that this is the most efficient thing. I think one thing Phil mentioned, which is that retail's not going to die out, okay? People are still going to gravitate towards physical locations, but it will be experiential. It will be purpose-driven, that, the brands will be there to express their DNA and only coincidentally selling products. And so for Asia, we, the Hong Kong retail industry and, the rest of Asia's retail industry is so dependent on foot traffic. So, and that makes property probably priced prohibitively high. So we need to be thinking, okay, if retail foot traffic is not going to be as important, if I'm a brand, what does my retail network look like in the future? How do I drive a higher percentage of e-commerce sale because I actually make more money from e-commerce? And if the future of retail is experiential, what is my brand DNA? How do I express that? And that's a really different question than let me move a lot of cheap goods as fast as I can. So, for brand owners, you got to be thinking about what do you stand for? What do you what is the message that you're selling? Because it's not actually about the product. It's about the process. It's about what emotional connection they're going to get from the product. And that's how you retain your customers over time. Eventually, the Asian consumer and the Chinese consumer is going to become more loyal. They're not there yet. Okay, but if you're a brand, you got to be looking to the future and say, how do I build for the market that is evolving, the one that is automated, digitized, e-commerce dependent, probably experiential, and using a lot of data to give the consumer the good that the consumer thinks they want, but actually it's my data which has helped me make that product what the consumer wants.
Wow, this is fascinating. That is, I think, is music to Grace's ear in terms of eventually the brand will rely on data to drive in terms of the brand image, the brand persona, the ethos, right? So I think that is very important. Thank you. Now, in real time, I think I need to pivot into the discussion based on the questions submitted on Slido. There are many questions, and I pick one of them maybe more related to Grace. Let me start with Grace. Grace, this question is from Rajani Krishna, is from the Executive MBA Program 2023. The question is, how do you define boundaries for data infringements when increasing predictability, even though the data is aggregated? Is it own will to sell data accounted in terms of data infringements?
Yeah, I think the whole point about data, thanks for Pamela, just advocates for data. I think that's really it's like fuel, okay, for future economy. Everybody has to rely on data to make decisions. I think the whole point or principle about using data is all based on consensus, okay? So I think that's really define the fundamental logic. So it's like a survey. Okay, the most traditional or historical use of data is survey, right? So survey is like the person asks you permission to answer a survey and ask you permission to use the data result in an aggregate way for publish a paper. Okay, so it's the same thing. Today we're just talking about more variety of data. We are talking about like larger quantity of data, and we are talking about like better technology of using or distracting useful information out of data, nothing more. Okay, so I think that it's really everyone that's actually regulated in the latest law as well. Everyone in the funnel of processing data has to be following the regulation of getting right consensus. Okay, starting from collecting data to using the data to using the data, reaching consumers. Okay, so every single step has to have the right consensus. So I think that's really the key to the boundary.
Well, thank you. Yeah, of course, you have to protect the consumers providing the data as well. Now, so this is a question for Pamela. This is the question the whole world would like to know. This is the question from Manida Sahota. So Pamela, the container freight shipping rates has went through the roof. Last year, now it came back down a little bit, but come back up again. So do you think this will go back to the pre-pandemic rates? Because now shipping things from Asia is extremely expensive. When would that this rate become stabilized?
Don't look for it in the next year. I mean, and it's not just that. It's not just that we have a mismatch between supply and demand. Now we have lockdown in China, the world's biggest manufacturing country. And now we have oil prices going through the roof. So forget it. There's no relief. I guess not in the next year or so. So yeah, sorry. It's going to drive a lot of supply chain redesign. If you're looking to onshore, maybe now's a time to consider that. But the trend of redesigning and rethinking your supply chain, this is a constant one. You don't redesign and then stop. You redesign and then iterate and iterate and iterate based on new market conditions. So and that's the whole story of the retail industry as well. You iterate and you change in order to respond to new trends. And then that's just a continuing process. So, and the whole rise of technology means that the cycles of change not just accelerated. It's getting faster and faster. So in terms of your corporate capabilities, that means you have to be more flexible, more agile, more ready to innovate in order to ride with market trends, and then hopefully get ahead of them and start driving them. But yeah, sorry, shipping, it's like not looking good.
Well, Pamela, I fully agree with you because I think that you said that the disruptions of the supply chain has not really subsided, not just in terms of China, also Ukraine and also Russia in terms of the shipment of wheat, and also has been disrupted and the oil price went up. So this problem is not going to go away within a short period of time. So I think we're all in agreement the shipping cost is not going to go down. Now, then you mentioned about the idea about onshoring or also maybe nearshoring or regional supply chains that will reduce the logistics costs. Now, but that will mean that consumers need to maybe get used to locally sourced products. So here's a question from Amir Kasanchi. He said, well, do you think that maybe there is a trend, even in the e-commerce space or retail space, that the consumers care about where the products are made? Is it made in USA? Because now President Biden pushing for that, and so China, made in China and whatnot. Do you think that the world is going to be more regionalized, that the consumers may become more loyal to the regional made products or not? Maybe ask Phil, what do you think?
Sorry, Professor, can you just repeat the last sentence? I had a little audio.
Do you think that in terms of consumers in the future, they will be more loyal to locally made products?
Yes, I think we're already discovering that. And again, just calling attention to the context of what we all had to experience during COVID, we actually had to come to appreciate the things in our backyard far more fully, and wait several months sometimes to get our deliveries from Amazon and everywhere else delivered. So the I think the focus on the human aspects of kind of togetherness and really kind of coming to appreciate culturally the context immediately in front of you was highly significant. I think localization also became far more appreciated. I mean, it's easier a little bit to talk about consumables like F&B and food products, but also in terms of local crafts. And I know Hong Kong is a city that's somewhat notorious for ignoring its culture at times and consuming things, the biggest brands from around the world. But if you've experienced the last 2 years of walking around Hong Kong like I have, then you realize that the kind of pride in the heritage that's here, the local crafts, locally designed products, especially as being very unique, and that actually being desirable for even very young consumers. There's already been last few years anyways, a trend of fast design, fast production, but a very limited run where the concept of scarcity, I think, is also reinforcing this idea. So what you wear, for instance, there's only a few of those made, or maybe only one. And the way that things can be manufactured and distributed today locally is really reinforcing that. So I think for the DNA of places, whether it's a small town, a city, or a large city like Hong Kong, that's all being enhanced. And that's actually good in terms of also the sustainability side of things, that we don't all just overly consume simply because we're aware of brands that are actually available, and really look for kind of unique aspects. And I'm working on a project in Macau at the moment where some of the interest is actually in non-branded goods. Right? People don't want to just continually consume what everyone else is wearing, and they're looking for kind of unique positions. And again, I think that's great for the overall retail diversity and environment.
Well, this is really fascinating. Now, I look through the questions, but I think that all the questions relate to physical goods. So I want to ask one question I've been dying to ask the three of you. This is something for my own education. This is about NFT, the virtual products. Last week, Dolce & Gabbana designed a digital tiara, and someone bought it for $300,000. That can be worn by his or her avatar in the metaverse, right? So virtual products. So in the case, Pamela does not need to worry about carbon emission. There's no carbon emissions, and also instant gratification. Now, do you think this is going to be the new trend of e-commerce? Not in the physical world, in the metaverse, in the e-commerce, because now they're starting selling virtual items on the virtual space. What do you think, Pamela? Start with you first. Virtual items.
So first of all, I want to contest that the NFT has lower carbon emission than a physical good. Because, you know, I mean, obviously, blockchain requires computers to verify and so on. So, I mean, this is but, you know, whether it does or it doesn't, I would say that NFT is such a jargon, it's such a buzzword, and that everyone and their brother is, you know, producing an NFT. Almost beyond the utility of NFT. I mean, NFTs are really useful for establishing foolproof traceability for products where authenticity really matters. Okay, and so, I mean, that's a logical usage. I think we're seeing a trend that there's going to be spinning all kind of products on NFT, and then a lot of money is going to be made. We should ask, what's it for? You know, who are they trying to, what are they trying to do in terms of their business? What is the purpose of it? So these questions, which are related to the sustainability of the project, and I mean, Phil mentioned purpose-driven products and, you know, purpose-driven design. These are really important So, you know, as a consumer, don't run after these trends without knowing what they're really about and where the profits are going.
Okay, so there's some warning. Phil, I want to ask you then to go to Grace at the founder words, virtual items.
Yeah, I think it'll be fairly obvious my position on NFTs given the comments that I've made. But I think it's real. I share Pamela's opinion about its utility. I think it's real simply in the sense that we live in a rapidly accelerating technological world, and so. It's clear that whether you like him or not, the world of Mark Zuckerberg is here, and it will always kind of be here. So the issue, I think, is really to kind of focus on what really matters. It's hard to talk about a sense of ethics when it comes to pure retail, but I think it is fundamentally important for people to get what they want, have that utility, but also then to understand what is truly of value. And so the position about NFTs for me is the same as creating real life experiences that really matter. That it needs to be rare and have emotion attached to it and value. Otherwise, it's just going to end up being yet another market that's going to burst, and lots of people will be suffering very badly for it. I think you also asked earlier about the metaverse. And that's a kind of reality. I'm already being asked to design a world in metaverse, and that's also kind of real. But we've all either read or watched the movie Ready Player One, and I think that as much as films are imagination, there's a certain amount of reality to that. And so I think following the trajectory of how our worlds kind of merge and continue to evolve in that sort of direction, the one thing for me is whether there are billion NFTs out there, I personally am only going to consume one or two of them over my lifetime.
Okay, so your prediction will be rather limited. Grace, do you think there is a market for all these NFT products? Because now luxury brands, they are creating a lot of this kind of NFT products. They're not cheap. Louis Vuitton designed a suit for a few $100,000 virtual.
I think number one is it's a much better concept for like people who are familiar with gaming. So it's not my type. I'm not a game person, but I talk to a lot of like young people who are like really like games. They are fascinated by the idea. I think they are so much used to the idea of buying, the virtual stuff. Number two, I think is for a brand who has really strong brand power, is just extension of another form of consumption. I think that might work. But in China, I think because of the limitation of Bitcoin and blockchain, etc. So I don't think it's very, very like active or valid concept in China yet. So I would say my personal opinion is I'm going to be very cautious about this. If it's like investment or like new industry, etc. to look at. But I mean, there must be people who are crazy about NFT. I can understand the mentality.
Well, thank you so much for your advice and also your warning, all three of you. So I think our younger generations need to take this advice to heart as they're listening in. So in little time, I'm going to wrap up this evening's event. I want to thank all three of you. So what we learned from you, three of you, is that the e-commerce is really alive and growing. No question about it. But yet it's very fragmented. So I think that's, as Pamela and Phil and Grace pointed out, that is, you really, because so fragmented, you need data. You need data to really iron out, to do more targeted production, targeted advertising, and targeted marketing, such that you can reduce waste. Because right now, a lot of suppliers, a lot of buyers, they are really mass produced and hope for the best. If it doesn't sell, mark down. So that creates a lot of waste. That kind of waste is wasting the natural resources, as well as creating carbon emissions as well, which is completely unnecessary. So in the future, if the I would call smart e-commerce, would be able to more personalize, customize, localize, such that would be hopefully maybe batch size of 1, such that we don't need to have all this wastage we see in around the world. We can reduce a lot of waste and can save the earth, right? So I think that on this note, I want to thank 3 of you for sharing your insights and expertise with us. And I'm going to turn over to Terry. Terry, over to you.
Good, Chris, a big thank you. I was just captivated just listening to the discussion. And interestingly, and I think you really summarized it, Chris, the power of data here. When you look at the number of references that data helps you push products as opposed to people having to do research on them, product design allows you to not overproduce, which can hopefully help the environment, et cetera. I just think a great set of learnings there. And by the way, you know, an interesting kind of set of common themes for both sessions about the level of innovation, about how profound, I mean, whether it's the future of e-commerce or, you know, whether it's looking at the metaverse, you know, whether it's looking at Web 3.0, et cetera, these are profound changes in products, services, how we live our lives, et cetera. Data is fundamental to all of this, that data is empowering so much of this, but there's this parallel track about a lot of concern about how data is being used. And is it just being used by large tech companies, or are individuals able to kind of own and democratize their own data? And the whole thought, you know, here about what is the role of government and guardrails, et cetera, I think all of this really comes together. It's interesting comparing the conference this year to last year. Last year, there was a lot of focus, just like this year, about technology-based innovation. But this year, there's this extra overlay about public policy, about guardrails, about ownership by individuals of data. So just a huge thank you and fascinating set of discussions. Let me just put out a reminder that we're going to have our next session this Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific. And there are going to be 2 sessions there. One is on the future of transportation. The other one is on the future of finance. The future of transportation is going to get into a whole host of issues on electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, and mobility as a service. So really, again, transformational areas of technology-based innovation. The finance discussion is going to get into, again, a whole host of issues on blockchain and where blockchain is going to be used for future innovation. It's going to get into a broader discussion about ESG and investing. And is there a new imperative that is really going to drive investing in a sustainable way that focuses on our environment? So let me just say a big thank you to everybody here, our speakers, our moderators, and importantly, all of you that have attended. Great discussion, great questions. Look forward to seeing you again this Thursday, 5 p.m. Pacific, which will be Friday morning in China. Thank you all. Have a great evening, or if you're in the greater China region, have a great day. Take care.